You're driving through downtown, and you see a person huddled in a thin coat next to a cart full of plastic bags. You might just pass by or look away. But what if it was someone you love? If tomorrow, due to an unexpected event, you yourself have no place to go, who do you hope will notice? Who will reach out? The homelessness crisis is no longer an other problem.
I stopped sleeping on the train and I just decided to sleep outside instead on the street because I thought it would be safer being on a sidewalk than on a train.
It's happening all around you, on every street corner, in every neighborhood. On this journey, you'll see clearly that behind every number is a face, a story. And that change doesn't require anything too big. It just starts with understanding yourself. Number 1, a quiet emergency. You might not see the beginning. It could be a missed paycheck, an unexpected surgery, a car repair that drains the rent money. Suddenly, what once felt stable becomes fragile. And in Michigan, for over 8,000 people, as of early 2025, that fragile moment has turned into daily survival without a place to call home. This crisis doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides in corners of everyday life. A man sitting quietly on a park bench, his eyes fixed on nothing. A woman pacing a bus stop, holding her belongings close. You drive past, maybe glance in the mirror. They're still there. It's not a flood, but erosion. One layer of security stripped at a time. Job loss, a landlord's notice, a support system that doesn't answer. These aren't people who gave up. They're people caught in a system not built for flexibility, one life event away from falling through. In communities like Flint and Detroit, where industry once promised stability, the aftershocks of economic shifts have left many without a net. But this story isn't just about numbers. It's about noticing, about asking how quickly any of us could go from getting by to not being seen at all. Let this not be just another scroll-past moment. Instead, pause. Ask yourself, if it were you, who would notice? And what kind of world would you want them to see you in? Number 2, roots beneath the surface. To understand the present, one must reach into the past. Michigan's story isn't defined by a single event, but by the gradual shift of an industrial legacy giving way to economic uncertainty. Once thriving factories slowed, then stopped, leaving behind entire communities searching for new footing. This is where financial stability began to slip, not in a loud crash, but in quiet layoffs, plant closures, and evaporating wages. For many families, what was once enough to get by now barely covers the essentials. It's not that people stopped trying. Rather, the cost of living rose while opportunities shrank. Stable work became harder to find. Job training, when available, often didn't match evolving market demands. As a result, households walked a tighter and tighter line between modest security and real poverty. This erosion is not felt equally. Older neighborhoods near shuttered plants face long-term underinvestment. Rural counties wrestle with limited employment hubs and slow digital infrastructure. Meanwhile, inflation in basic services like utilities, groceries, transportation continues to weigh heavily on working-class budgets. Safety nets, meant to catch people in transition, often arrive late or fail to account for regional complexities. In some towns, even applying for aid requires internet access many don't have. In others, stigma keeps struggling families in the shadows, their hardship unspoken but deeply felt. The path that led to today's instability is paved with policies that didn't adapt fast enough, markets that shifted without support, and systems that assumed resilience without reinforcing it. Now thousands face hard choices, not because they lack will, but because the math no longer works. We cannot reshape the past, but we can read the map it left behind. And it points not to personal failure, but to a system in need of recalibration, where support, growth, and dignity must once again align. So what do you think this all points to? Comment, system failure, if you believe outdated structures are part of the problem. And don't go anywhere. What comes next will reveal just how these cracks affect people most at risk. Stay with us. Number 3. Cracks in the safety net. Where do people turn when stability slips beyond reach? In Michigan, those looking for help often encounter systems designed for a different era, well-meaning but weathered. The result isn't just inefficiency, it's a widening gap between people's needs and the structures meant to meet them. Community organizations, state offices, and non-profit networks all work under increasing pressure. Budgets once sufficient are now stretched across growing caseloads. Staff fatigue is real, and turnover leaves critical services understaffed. Assistance centers meant for temporary relief often become long-term waiting rooms. From the inside, many service providers share a common frustration. The rules are outdated, funding is piecemeal, and technology often lags behind. A social worker in Lansing explains, "We want to help, but we're constantly fighting fires with a garden hose." Her voice reflects hundreds across the state working within systems they know must evolve. The homeless crisis has made these weaknesses more visible. Inconsistencies in eligibility, long application backlogs, and fragmented coordination across departments contribute to delays. What should be a straightforward path to shelter or aid becomes a maze with no map. Geography further complicates access. Urban centers may have overwhelmed but reachable services. Rural regions often have none. A family 50 miles from the nearest intake center might wait weeks just for an appointment, all while sleeping in a car. Critically, policies have not always recognized modern realities. Gig economy workers without fixed incomes, single parents juggling multiple part-time roles, or seniors navigating digital forms alone. Support systems built on yesterday's assumptions often fail today's families. Still, hope persists in pockets of reform. Pilot programs, community-driven adaptations, and policy discussions are happening. But without broader structural shifts, too many fall through the net. And when the safety net tears, it's not just individuals who suffer, it's the shared foundation of care that frays. Number 4. The faces behind the figures. Michigan's 2025 homelessness crisis isn't just about numbers. It's about people, families, seniors, veterans, and young adults who are forced to make impossible choices without stable housing. A man dozing on a park bench. A mother holding her child in the back seat of a car. A teenager staring out of a motel window, unsure what tomorrow brings. These aren't fictional scenes. They are the quiet reality for many across Michigan who face the weight of housing instability with limited protection. Among those most affected are families with children. The daily uncertainty of where to sleep, how to stay warm, and when the next meal might come adds strain even the strongest parents cannot fully shield their kids from. Teachers quietly notice the signs: missing homework, sleepy eyes, students asking for extra snacks, not attention-seeking, but surviving. Another group bearing disproportionate impact are older adults. Many have spent decades in communities they can no longer afford. Fixed incomes, rising costs, and lack of nearby services leave them balancing essentials, medication, groceries, rent, with hard choices no one should face late in life. Young people transitioning out of foster care face a steep cliff. With little family support and few stable connections, they often age out of the system without a place to go, making them more vulnerable to long-term instability right at adulthood's edge. Communities of color are also disproportionately represented, not because of isolated choices, but because of systemic inequalities that stretch back generations. Housing discrimination, economic exclusion, and underfunded schools created paths that continue to affect access and outcomes today. These aren't isolated stories. They're part of a broader pattern that rewrites what it means to grow up, grow old, or try to rebuild. And while some policies have made progress, like reduced veteran homelessness or targeted support for first-time displaced families, the road ahead remains long. Each of these faces a unique challenge, but their stories point to a shared truth. Some shoulders carry more than others, and if we want to understand the crisis fully, we must first see who's holding the most. In the next part of our journey, we explore how geography intensifies these burdens, revealing how life in a rural county or an urban corridor can shape very different realities for those without stable housing. Number 5. One state, two realities. From a distance, Michigan may appear as a single, unified map. But when you step into the streets of Detroit or onto the quiet roads of Alpena, the landscape of housing instability splits into two strikingly different realities, each urgent, each deeply human. In urban centers like Detroit and Flint, the crisis is highly visible. Boarded-up buildings sit next to overcrowded shelters. Outreach workers travel blocks where sidewalk tents now outnumber vacant rentals. According to the Michigan Statewide Housing Needs Assessment 2024, more than 60% of the state's unsheltered population is concentrated in its 5 largest cities. Here, the issue is density. Too many people, not enough beds. In these areas, the legacy of industrial decline meets soaring housing demand. What used to be working-class neighborhoods are now caught between economic displacement and development that prices out long-time residents. Meanwhile, service providers report wait lists stretching months, leaving families in limbo despite qualifying for aid. In contrast, rural communities face a different but equally painful challenge: isolation. In counties like Lake, Oscoda, and Houghton, the nearest shelter can be more than 50 miles away. A 2023 report by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services noted a 28% increase in rural homelessness since 2020. Yet these areas often lack public transit, emergency housing options, or full-time outreach teams. The result is a quieter struggle, sometimes unseen, even by neighbors. A single mother sleeping in her car outside a closed library. An elderly man relying on propane heat in a trailer not built for winter. These stories rarely reach headlines, but they define rural hardship. The solutions needed in each setting differ. Urban centers need expanded shelter capacity and affordable housing near transit lines. Rural regions require mobile services, flexible aid access, and infrastructure investment. A one-size-fits-all plan simply won't work. The contrast between city and countryside shows that Michigan's housing instability is not a uniform crisis. It's a patchwork of overlapping emergencies, each demanding attention on its own terms. Next, we'll explore how these divided landscapes also lead to divided health outcomes, revealing how the housing crisis and public well-being are more connected than many realize. Number 6. Health beneath the surface. In the absence of stable housing, the body and mind pay a high price. This isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable crisis. People without a permanent place to stay often struggle with consistent access to basic health needs, refrigeration for medication, hygiene facilities, even rest. Over time, minor illnesses turn severe. Conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or asthma spiral when treatment plans can't be followed. Mental health isn't spared. Constant uncertainty, exposure to the elements, and lack of privacy can lead to heightened anxiety, depression, and trauma. According to a 2024 Grand Traverse County Health Survey, nearly 70% of unsheltered individuals reported unmanaged physical or mental health conditions. Healthcare workers see this every day. One clinician in Lansing shared how often patients are treated and discharged, only to return within weeks, not because treatment failed, but because the environment makes recovery nearly impossible. Solutions exist: mobile clinics, integrated housing and health programs, earlier outreach. But they require coordination, funding, and above all, recognition that health cannot improve in isolation. To truly address Michigan's homeless crisis, housing must be viewed not just as shelter, but as a fundamental health intervention. Because healing needs more than medicine. It needs somewhere to begin and somewhere to continue. Number 7. Local sparks of innovation. Sometimes the most powerful answers start small. In the shadow of a large-scale homeless crisis, it's often the local hands, neighbors, volunteers, small organizations that craft some of the most hopeful beginnings. In Kalamazoo, a non-profit founded by someone who once lived on the streets now runs a laundry trailer, mobile showers, and a clothing bank, all created from lived experience. You can't rebuild your life if you don't feel human first, the founder says. Her words echo the sentiment across many towns. Dignity is the first step towards stability. Up north in Marquette, where winter temperatures turn deadly, a church opens its basement not only for warmth, but for connection. Local students volunteer, serving food and playing board games with guests. It's not just a meal, it's belonging. These human-scale gestures build resilience where policy may still lag behind. In Muskegon, a pilot program has introduced a designated outdoor living area, a space where unhoused individuals can stay safely while working with outreach teams. Critics raise concerns about long-term effectiveness, but early feedback shows that even this simple model reduces harm, creates structure, and builds trust. Smaller towns like Ionia and Alpena, lacking large infrastructures, are turning to grassroots efforts. One pastor turned a church fellowship hall into emergency housing. A retired nurse now runs a mobile medical unit from a van. These aren't just stopgap solutions. They are community-based strategies meeting people where they are, not where bureaucracy expects them to be. What unites these efforts is not size or funding. It's belief. A belief that no one should navigate life without support, and that healing begins with proximity. They don't wait for statewide reform. They move, daily, in compassion. These stories remind us that even in the midst of institutional strain, people innovate. And in the next section, we'll look closer at how some of these community-led models are scaling up, shaping policy, drawing attention, and inspiring action far beyond their origin. One laundry trailer, one church basement, one mobile van, it all starts with one. Comment, it starts small, if these stories moved you. Big change grows from local ground. Keep watching to see how small ideas are making statewide impact. Number 8. From grassroots to policy. Not every idea scales. Not every pilot becomes policy. But across Michigan in 2025, some small community-led experiments are slowly influencing the larger conversation around housing stability. Not because they're perfect, but because they're proving what's possible. Take the tiny home initiative launched in Saginaw. Initially met with skepticism, seen as too unconventional, too temporary, it now receives city funding after 2 years of operational success. A local council member remarked, "We didn't think it would work, but the stability it gave people, even short-term, bought them time to regroup, and that matters." In Grand Rapids, a mobile case management unit modeled after a volunteer project is now being evaluated by city health departments. Why? Because centralized systems simply can't reach everyone. Bringing services into neighborhoods, literally, has bridged the gap where government outreach couldn't. But not all stories are of easy victories. Some community models, like makeshift outdoor shelters or shared meal programs, struggle with inconsistent funding, zoning restrictions, or neighborhood opposition. One nonprofit director in Flint explains, "The model works, but it's exhausting. We build trust, but every renewal cycle feels like starting from zero again." Still, these models spark important lessons. First, proximity matters. Programs work better when built around the real lives of those affected. Second, flexibility is key. One-size-fits-all designs rarely serve populations with complex needs. And finally, legitimacy takes time. Community credibility can open doors that paperwork alone cannot. Policy advisors at the state level have begun referencing these pilots when shaping broader frameworks. In early 2025, the Michigan Housing Task Force cited at least 5 grassroots programs as examples of adaptive, scalable response. Though still in testing stages, they're beginning to shift what's considered viable. It's not transformation overnight. It's friction, trial, error, and the occasional breakthrough. But slowly, these small fires of local ingenuity are lighting the path forward. Next, we'll look deeper at what threatens that path: the looming expiration of pandemic-era funding, and what's at stake if momentum stalls. Number 9. When the money runs out. For years, a silent engine has kept many housing initiatives alive in Michigan: pandemic-era emergency funds. These temporary dollars were never meant to last, but their impact has been undeniable. As they begin to expire in 2025, communities across the state are bracing for what comes next. Shelter directors describe these funds as a lifeline. They allowed expanded bed capacity, staff hiring, mental health outreach, and transitional housing options that didn't exist before. In some cities, they helped cut first-time homelessness by nearly a third. But none of these improvements were designed for permanence. They were patchwork, meant to buy time. Now that time is running out. A recent policy brief by the Michigan Center for Housing Stability warned that over 40% of current services are tied to funding scheduled to end this year. That includes outreach teams, temporary shelters, and rent support for thousands of households. One program leader in Lansing stated plainly, "We know what works. We just don't know how to keep it going." The danger isn't just loss of progress, it's reversal. Without replacement funding or long-term investment, many of the fragile gains made since 2020 could collapse. That means more people back on the street, fewer services available, and overstretched systems facing even greater demand. Some advocates are calling for state-level stabilization plans, proposing dedicated housing funds immune to short-term political shifts. Others emphasize private-public partnerships to sustain community programs. But implementation takes time, and time is precisely what's slipping away. This moment reveals a brutal truth. Even the most promising solutions falter without stability behind them. Programs need more than passion. They need protection. And without deliberate action, a shortfall in funding could trigger a new wave of displacement that no emergency grant can fix. As we approach the final chapter of this journey, we turn toward the question that now matters most. What kind of future will we choose to build together? Number 10. The choice ahead. Picture a child holding a backpack, not filled with dreams, but with clothes and toiletries. Imagine an elderly woman waiting at dusk for a bus that might never come because she has no home to return to. These are not images from some distant place. They are unfolding every day in neighborhoods across Michigan. And yet, beyond the numbers, beyond the policies, this is still a story about people. People who once had jobs, families, homes, people who lost more than keys. They lost stability, structure, safety. They did not choose this crisis, but we can choose how we respond to it. This journey has taken us across city blocks and rural roads, into shelters, classrooms, and kitchens. We've listened to outreach teams, educators, policy workers, and, most importantly, those with lived experience. What we've found is not hopelessness, but a quiet urgency. A need not just for more resources, but for a broader shift in how we see housing as a human right, not a luxury. Real solutions exist. We've seen them, small and large, temporary and transformational. But none of them can succeed without collective will. To our leaders, funding matters, but so does follow-through. To our communities, empathy is powerful, but action is transformative. To each of us, staying informed is the first step. Speaking up is the second. Housing is more than a roof. It's stability, opportunity, and dignity. And when we protect it for others, we reinforce it for ourselves. Michigan stands at a crossroad. What lies ahead depends not on one grand gesture, but on the quiet decisions we make, daily, together. Explore the real world of homelessness, not to feel sorry for ourselves, but to understand and reflect on our shared responsibility to our community. Every statistic and story in this video is based on publicly available data and reliable sources at the time of its creation. We hope that this content will help raise awareness, spur humanitarian action, and open up necessary conversations. What do you think is most urgent to improve this situation? Leave a comment, share your perspective, and don't forget to subscribe to Roamkind to spread positive awareness with each journey.